I'm Kaiser Kuo of the Sinica Podcast and the band Chun Qiu, formerly of Tang Dynasty. You are listening to Jake Kuzmal's Music Existence.
Welcome to another instance of Music Existence, where because of music, we exist. This is my second interview of 2025, bringing on another very special guest. This guy is Kaiser Kuo, the founding guitarist of Tang Dynasty, a band that I admired since I was a teenager. And since 2010, this guy has also hosted his very own Sinica Podcast, talking about current Chinese affairs. But we'll get into all that. Let's keep it music oriented. And Kaiser, glad to have you, man.
Glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Jake.
So your butterscotch guitar, let's start with that. Did you get a chance to play it?
I've been doing nothing but playing it. I mean, we're talking about it's basically a butterscotch Sire Telecaster. It's a Larry Carlton T7. It's their Telecaster model. Sire, not to be confused with Squire, they started off making basses, but they branched into guitars with a Larry Carlton signature, and they do amazing stuff. You're a musician, so you might know what I'm talking about here. So, for example, I mean, they've got these roasted maple necks, both the Strat and the Tele types, and with rolled fretboards. I mean, rolled edges on the fretboards, really, really huge, fat frets, super fun to play, great electronics. I mean, everything sounds just perfect, and it's like a super Telecaster. I mean, it sounds exactly like the Telecaster. So yeah, I've been having a really good time just learning, kind of country-ish twangy licks and stuff that I never thought I would be playing, but that sound just wholly appropriate on this instrument. So yeah.
Even at this stage, there's still a lot more to learn.
Yeah. There's whole styles that I've never even touched, whole genres of music that, well, mostly just for lack of ability, but not lack of interest. But I think to my great regret, I'd been a sort of narrow player a lot of my life, where I was so focused on rock, on metal, on prog rock, that I never really became what I would consider a really competent blues player. I'd never been good at country or bluegrass or so many other genres that I've since come to. I mean, let alone jazz, right? I mean, I'm just not that good. So hey, getting there. I've been putting in a lot of time recently.
And I saw you in a magazine spread with your dad. You look like your dad, and I was wondering, with the connection drawn there, did your dad really encourage you to kind of put yourself out there and sort of be the person that you ought to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think my dad was never a big public figure. He came from a very prominent family. I mean, his father was a very eminent historian with, deep connections within the Kuomintang administration when they were both in China and later in Taiwan. And then, kind of fled the Kuomintang into diaspora in the early 1960s, lived the rest of his life outside of China, outside of Greater China. But my father, oldest son of the family and all, he was trained as an engineer. And I think from a pretty early age, he decided, even though, I think anyone who met him, anyone who knew him sort of understood that he had abundant kind of leadership qualities. He was extraordinarily charismatic, had a real gravitas. Was a very serious man who everyone sort of felt compelled to listen to. And he also had great qualities like, he was wise and he was just. But he never really sought that for himself. He really devoted himself to being head of the family, to giving us every possible opportunity and to really educating us. And so in my generation, among the four siblings, I think three of us have, for whether they decided deliberately or not, have ended up in fairly public, fairly conspicuous, places in life. And he encouraged that. I think he really armed us with those tools. My mother contributed in no small part to this as well. When it came to music, they really never really hesitated to encourage us to do these sorts of things. They understood that it wasn't typical Chinese American tiger parents who were forcing you to play piano or play violin.
There's stuff from Hong Kong too, like Teddy Robin and the Playboys and the Lotus and all that. So
nothing like that. They were not interested in Chinese or Chinese popular music at all. When they moved to the States in the 1950s, they were really interested in the music that was happening here. So
okay.
Full of LPs, full of a lot of it was, sort of doo-wop 50s stuff. Later on, a lot of seminal 1960s music, and especially a lot of folk and folk rock. My parents, my dad was something of a hi-fi guy, had, always nice stereo gear that he didn't want us fucking with too much.
But he's like, check this out, son.
Right. Listen to this. He was appreciative of the quality of sound of things, and he was always open to listening to even the music that I listened to. I could sit him down and I could walk him through. This is why I think this has merit. This is compositionally excellent. This is listen to how well this is recorded. Listen to and so I would sit him down and make him listen to Dark Side, or make him listen to Hemispheres, or make him listen to Steely Dan's Asia, things like that.
Okay, so did it start with rock and then go more progressive, or was it progressive from the get-go?
It was sort of in parallel. I mean, I think I remember being around maybe 13 years old, and I was playing Dungeons and Dragons at the home of a friend.
As anybody would.
As anyone would. At age 13, I was born in 1966, so this puts it at the late 1970s. So D&D was just getting started, but there I was at Paul Kaltoff's house, and his older brother had music going on in the background. It was ELP's Welcome Back, My Friends, to the Show That Never Ends, ladies and gentlemen. This is Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Yeah. And then he put on the Yes album, and I was blown away. I was just completely ignoring, the role of the 20-sided die to listen to what was, this music. And I asked Paul's brother, Steve, to make tapes of this stuff. Yeah. And so that was my first exposure to prog. Before that, I was definitely listening to a lot of rock, and including some prog that I didn't know to be prog. I was drawn to it for the right reasons. I mean, I'm talking about albums like, The Grand Illusion and Pieces of Eight by Styx, or Kansas's Leftoverture and Point of No Return. Prog, definitely American style prog. Mm-hmm. But it was really Rush, Yes. Later on, bands like Genesis and King Crimson that grabbed me and really have never let go.
That's really awesome. And so you went to visit China as a teenager back in the very early 80s, right?
Yeah, that's right, 81.
Mm-hmm. And were you interested in it culturally, architecturally, but like before any musical aspects came about?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I think architecturally probably not. I think there wasn't much to recommend Chinese architecture in the early part of the Reform and Opening period. A lot of it had been pulverized during the Cultural Revolution, and what remained was nothing to crow about. Right. I came to a Beijing that was still a very low slung city. It had maybe one or two buildings over 15 stories tall. At that point, 81, that hadn't even really started yet. I mean, It was still I like to say that, I visited that city in 81. And it was still in black and white.
Right.
It felt like my next trip there in 86 is 5 years later, and everything had turned into a vivid color.
Yeah, whoa.
Yeah, so, but no, it wasn't about music. It wasn't about, it wasn't even really about culture. It was, I would say, if anything, my interest in China was mainly just to, I don't believe in any kind of mystical, racial connection or anything, but part of it was kind of genetic. Part of it was just, I really want to understand.
Like your roots, right?
Right. I want to understand where I came from. I mean, I had seen the show Roots, right?
Yeah.
I had seen Alex Haley's Roots. It was, on television. And
Finding your roots, right?
yeah, no, there was something to that. I wanted to connect better with my parents. But I mean, there was another more selfish reason, which was that, I mean, and this is true. I'm not exaggerating at all. My older and younger brothers, they're each, less than 2 years older and younger, or barely more than 2 years in my younger brother's case. But they were really conspicuously brilliant guys. They were better at pretty much anything than I was. I didn't have anything going for me in my parents' eyes except for being better at the Chinese language and maybe being able to exert willpower to not complain. So the whole thing for me, 81, that trip, I just remember it mainly as just me wanting to show up my brothers by never uttering a single word of complaint. And I did a phenomenal job of that. I did a great job despite, the lack of air conditioning, despite, sometimes really pretty questionable gastronomical fare. This is 81. You got to remember, this was not kind of abundance of today. This was, and so I would, really kind of try to remember the correct forms of address for every obscure relative that we met. Look them in the eye with bright-eyed and never sort of show boredom or show, any sign of less than enthusiasm, and sat up straight, ate whatever was put in front of me. That was my whole gig. I mean, and I was just sort of glad to see how my parents were seeing this. They would always say, look how 懂事, which means you sort of mature or understand how 懂事 Kaiser is. And yeah, so after that, basically, I had a free ticket.
And it wasn't just for show, right? You was some of it sincere?
I think it started off for show.
Okay.
And I've likened it to how, they will tell you that physiologically, if you force yourself to smile all the time, you actually will feel happy. There's like a connection between, it's, fake it till you make it. That's very much what I did. I mean, I faked it until I actually did feel a real connectedness and a facility in that culture and with that language. And then I found myself itching to go back. So 86, I went back with the family again. But there was even more reason then after that for me to, always want to be in China. First of all, I mean, there was girls suddenly.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
And suddenly I was 15 the first time I went. Then I was 20 or 20. Yeah, 20. And
of course. Everybody
a million
for
other
the girls.
Right. I mean, not. It was more sort of the Chinese American girls who were also there for the summer, whose parents had brought them there.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, right? Anyway, so and music, had started to creep in. I mean, when I went there in 81, I brought a box full of cassette tapes, and I brought a boom box, and I carried it around with me wherever I went. And I was really interested in playing, Black Sabbath and AC/DC and Blue Oyster Cult and Rush and Led Zeppelin for Chinese kids my age who I met, and they were horrified by it. They couldn't understand what I could possibly see in any of that music. They thought it was just really noisy and just too raucous for them. But there I was. I got kind of a kick out of doing that, just sort of playing music as loud and drawing people in and then sort of trying to explain to them in my shitty Chinese what this was, what it meant, where these guys were from, what the genre was, and all that.
It ain't like a fearful kind of reaction. It's more surprising. It's like when you guys first came into the scene, like when you interviewed in Metal Evolution. Was that hair real?
Yeah. That absolutely. That's true. I mean, that happened all the time. I mean, and we had really weird questions that were put to us all the time. They didn't. So I mean, you have to understand, people could not distinguish between different genres of Western music. To them, the Carpenters and John Denver and Michael Jackson
were equal.
and Metallica were all in the same category.
And by '86, there was a lot more tape trading. There was a lot more.
No, '86. There still was almost nothing.
I know. Like Slay Jen, he had the early stuff that he did. He did the Prodigal album, and then he did the 7-player band album.
Right.
And you listen to, I think, My Shitty Chinese. There's a track called Jianan Xing, and in both versions of that song, in 85 and 84, it has two distinct solos. There's the one that they played with 7-player band, and then there's one that he did as a demo. And like each one, it's like, it floats you through a loop, like, what the hell? So it's like the sound of something brewing still. Like, it might not be fully realized, but for what everyone was taking in at the time, there was something there. There was something like uniquely Beijing.
Well, I think in 85, 86, you could probably count the number of Chinese nationals who were involved in any way in rock music on the fingers of two hands. There were so few people. There were a lot of expatriates, not a lot. There were a handful of expatriates. I mean, I highly suggest you talk at some point to a guy named Graham Earnshaw.
Was he in Beijing All Stars?
That's right, Beijing All Stars. Well, you know your stuff. I mean, you know your early Chinese rock. I'm really impressed. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he will have some really fascinating old war stories for you. There are a few people who he could put you in touch with, who know what it was like, in 84, in 85. So I wasn't aware of the scene until I didn't really get in touch with anyone until 88. And by then, there were 100 people in the scene.
And then that's when Black Panther was more, like you were saying, more of a collective. It wasn't like a fully realized band. It was more, because they were more of like a kind of like a show band. Because like when Dole Wei came in, he was one of their frontman, and at the time he was listening to like Teresa Tang, Yeah,
I mean, and George Michael. I mean, that was the big thing. I remember, in early
the
December,
cultural exchange program where they had Wham come to China, right?
That's right. And in fact, I was quite good friends with Chen Fangyuan, who was the singer on the B-side, the Chinese version of Careless Whispers. And she was the person who sang the Chinese version of that on the single that was released in China. And she toured with them, translated for them. She was an amazing person. I haven't seen her in God knows how long, but she was a pretty well-known pop singer in China in the late 1980s. or really in the mid 1980s. But anyway, yeah, Dou-Wei. I mean, I remember him in early December asking me to transcribe for him the lyrics to "Last Christmas" by Wham, which he sang at a Christmas show that we played with Black Panther. I played with them in December of '88. That was really funny. But yeah,
what do you think? Because Dou-Wei's like so studious, very alternative, very experimental guy, and here he is listening. But like it's like you said.
I think Dou-Wei was an interesting thing because he didn't have. I don't think at that point he had anything like a musical allegiance of any kind. He would just do whatever was popular at the time. And so, he could grow his hair out and perm it and put on leather and front Black Panther.
Yeah.
Within a year, literally within a year, by, say 92, he had discovered Peter Murphy and Bauhaus and
that was his solo stuff, right?
Right. He was certainly talented in that way, but I think that he didn't have deep-rooted passions at that point yet. And I think that was true of a lot of the early musicians. I mean, some of them did. Some of them really, got into the one thing that they were going to do, and they've done it now for 30 plus years. So you look at his bandmate in Black Panther, Li Tong, who's the one kind of constant member of that band.
Yeah.
And he was an amazing blues rock guitarist back then, and remains so today.
You come in like the late 80s again, the formation of Tang Dynasty, and at that time you came along, you meet Dingwu, and that exchange was like, it was really cool because it was like a brotherhood. You kind of see eye to eye with what you can offer each other musically.
Yeah, I mean, and let's not imagine for a minute. I'm glad you put it that way because it wasn't a one-way exchange at all. It wasn't like I brought the gospel of American rock and was just simply preaching it. No, he so abundantly talented and has so much. I mean, was at that point already so. He had it. He had the stuff.
It's like you said in the Metal Evolution thing. He can sing like a goddamn banshee. Yeah,
no, he absolutely could. He was an amazing singer, and he had a bewitching charisma, an absolutely off the charts, immeasurable rock star charisma. So yeah, the thing about I wasn't by any means. By forming Tang Dynasty, the first stable configuration rock band.
Right, yeah. You were the foundation, right?
And so Cobra before us, Yan Jing She, which was an all-female band.
Yeah, that was.
They had a stable lineup. They had a sound. They had a look. I mean, before that, I'm still very, very good friends with their front woman, Xiao Nan.
Yeah.
So she's amazing.
Very good stuff. I discovered like the early sound, even Wei Hua in the breathing. They thought she was, and I always quote like her intro in that song "New World" that she does.
I know everyone needs a new world. If you want freedom, here I am, ready to give you everything.
It was a different time. I mean, and she, of course, she was, she had a very interesting history, as you know. She was
a news reporter before that.
Presenter on the Chinese national television for the English language channel, and during the student protests of '89, she sided openly, publicly on the air with the students. and for that reason was, removed from her position.
Yeah.
So obviously she had, some natural political proclivities, let us say, that she entered the rock scene. And her teaming up with Gao Qi was, they were kind of an odd couple. She was pretty buttoned down, pretty straight-laced, and older. Gao Qi was, this young, fresh-faced. I mean, he's I think, just one of the most talented people in music in China.
Of course.
He's amazing. Yeah, no, he's astonishing. But, I didn't love that first collaboration. I mean, Breathing is a weird animal. It's
they
not,
did have like very anthemic songs. I like them.
Sure. Yeah. The early days, it's fun. I've got notebooks full of stuff that I sketched or drew or wrote down from those early days, and it'll make it all into the memoir one day. But
and I love it, and I kind of get frustrated as one lone white guy when I see these Chinese rock histories. They never mention Yaoguan Beijing 1 or Yaoguan Beijing 2 or like Rock in China compilations.
中国华 is the other really, really important ones.
Yeah. Like so many great compilations, and if they were to just stumble upon my channel, they can have a huge listening party. Whole history.
You have an amazing collection of stuff. I mean, some fun, really, really great stuff. I saw you have Beijing Yaowen 1 and 2, I think, that are up.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. There's a guy named Victor Huey. I don't know if you've come across him.
Yeah, he posted a picture of Sui Jian's band ADO.
Otto, yeah.
Yeah, Otto.
Yeah, you should definitely get in touch with him, because he was really there sort of from the beginning and was faithfully documenting it all on video. He's got an apartment, according to a friend of mine, and he's just a pack rat. He's just got just like, it's like a crowded bookstore or library of just old formats of different video, all of Chinese rock bands, beginning in the mid 80s and stretching all the way up until recent years.
Wow. So
it's kind of amazing. So
your formation with Tang Dynasty, you actually had your roommate as the drummer, right, Andrew?
Yeah, Drew Sabo. Yeah, so Drew, I'm still my best friend to this day. We were freshman roommates at UC Berkeley. Berkeley back then had this really clever system of putting people together in the dorms. They would make you fill out this roommate card where you had to answer, are you neat, or are you a slob, or are you a morning person? Are you a smoker? And I answered all those questions, but the most important one was, who are your 3 favorite bands? And I put the same 3 favorite bands as Drew did, and so naturally they matched us. So maybe you can guess what they were, but so it was Yes, Rush, and Led Zeppelin. So
Yeah.
It's pretty basic, suburban white kid kind of stuff. But he's from Cupertino, California. And I walk into the room before he's come back from, he was in the marching band, so he was away at band camp, but he had already moved into the dorm. When I opened the door to it and I saw a gigantic Neil Peart poster, like a gigantic banner of him, playing Tama Kid. It's like a Tama advertisement. I was like, oh, yes. Another Rush poster as I turned my head. A whole box of cassettes that pretty much duplicated my collection. and then like, you know, a pretty road-worn Fender guitar, a box full of broken drumsticks. And I just knew, oh my God, this guy and I are going to get along just fantastically. So we couldn't even get to sleep the first night when he came back, and all we did was talk, and had decided, okay, we're forming a band right away. I mean, we played stuff. I had brought a Les Paul, a little amp, and we were, we just went at it.
And Tang Dynasty, the name was your idea, right?
Yeah, Tang Dynasty, the name was mine.
The concept, right, too. That was all you, right?
Yeah, the concept, the name. I mean, they all agreed to it, which is really great, because I can't even imagine what direction the band would have taken if we had come up with some other, kind of a dumb metal name. But that one, yeah, I mean, it had a lot of meaning. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the historical Tang Dynasty, but
prosperous spirit.
Yeah, we really wanted to evoke the spirit of cosmopolitanism. It was an era in which things that were foreign were very appreciated, whether in the realm of philosophy or religion. For example, Buddhism really made it inroads during the Tang, and it was, I think, also it happened to have been a period where there was tremendous cultural openness. And we felt like at that time, China was entering such a period in the late 1980s, the early, first decade, not quite even over yet, of reform and opening. And this is all before, the crackdown in 89. And so we felt that it really hit the spirit of the times in a good way, and was a way to kind of make a connection to what I thought were cultural touchstones analogous to those that a lot of Western metal was, often invoking. Tolkien, medievalism, fantasy, that kind of stuff, right? You look at so many Western metal bands that, have their names either derived from Tolkien or, from Conan the Barbarian or fantasy, right? So China has its own tradition of that too. There's a very, very famous sort of historical fiction novel called Sui Tang Yan Yi, the romance of the Sui and the Tang dynasties.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends love that. We all loved the romance of the Three Kingdoms. We all loved, the Water Margin. We all loved a lot of the Jin Yong. I hadn't actually read them by then, but I'd seen TV productions of the Louis Cha or Jin Yong novels, these martial arts epics. And, this is like the standard. We mentioned Dungeons and Dragons earlier. Same kind of guys, right? Same kind of people who were listening to metal, were rolling 20-sided die on the weekends, and knew what you meant when you said strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma.
Yeah, and that first Tang Dynasty album, I mean, you'd composed some of the songs, like the 9/4 Soaring Bird.
Part of it. I mean, look, don't overstate it. I made contributions to some of the songs. Some of them I had no contributions to whatsoever. I mean, including the title track. Liu Yijun Lao told me that it was inspired by me, but I didn't write a note of it, and it's I think one of the best things ever.
You really appreciate him.
I really appreciate. I mean, love is a strong word.
Yeah.
He's not an easy guy to get along with. I mean, he's
but
a weird.
You admire
Oh yeah,
his
no.
ability.
I mean, as a player, absolutely. I mean, look, he was the first shred monster in China. I mean, he was like but he has a lot of the flaws of the shredder, right? I mean, sometimes he tends to put technique over artistry, right? I mean, sometimes he tends to focus a little too much on virtuosity at the expense of real creativity. I think that he was at his best on that first Tang Dynasty album. That was a really happy blend of the two. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't all his virtuosity. His chops weren't always in the service of good songwriting.
Right.
Sometimes they were, though, and then it was wonderful.
And I mean, the circumstances for A Dream Return to Tang Dynasty, the sound was, kind of you kind of learn to roll with the punches kind of thing. It's kind of like in King's X's case, with Ty Tabor, coming up with that sound for Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, and initially hating how the guitar sound, but, he learned to appreciate it later on.
Yeah, I've never learned to appreciate either the guitar sounds on either of the albums. I think that, like, on the first album, I think it sounds like it's all played through a Rockman. I mean, it sounds like it was... look, everyone loved Boston and everything, but it just doesn't... they sound still... They don't sound rich. They don't sound like, natural distortion at all. So I wasn't thrilled with a lot of the... there's too much reverb on it. There's just... It's a lot... Everything's too wet and a little too shiny. It's overproduced, but underproduced at the same time.
Wow, yeah. And it's kind of unique because when you listen to that first album, the second album we'll get to in a little bit, but the first album was, it kind of lends to that uniqueness. I agree with you in noticing that obviously, when I heard it, I was a young teenager, so I was like, yay, metal from, China, whatever. But, to say that it's too wet, it really does have this wetness, almost like humidity.
Yeah, no, it's just, too effects drenched. There isn't enough rawness on it.
Yeah.
There's great playing on it. Who can fault, Lao's playing? The solos are great.
And Ding Wu's voice, obviously.
Ding Wu's voice is great. That took a lot of it. Took a lot of work. And look, the people who worked on it. We owe them a ton. Landy Zhang, who is the producer, and Jiaming Su, who is the sort of producer engineer, who also played on some of it. And the team that they brought in to do some of the lyrics, and even some of the songwriting. I don't love all of it. There's honestly, there's stuff on that I think is really just fucking cheesy. But hey, nothing's perfect, and it was a good start. But yeah, there's, how it is. You only hear the faults, right? Like later on. It's painful for me to listen to anything that I've done before because I tend only to hear, the problems with it.
I think even when any member of the band is involved in a process for so long, that took them until like December of '91 before they were finished like recording that album. And like, I bet like doing all those tracks, those takes, and then feedback here, feedback there, you just get tired.
Yeah, I can imagine. I wasn't there, obviously, to my
Yeah. But like when you record anything, like that's not done like expeditiously. It's like, oh God, are we gonna?
Yeah, it's not always like that. I think about in 2005 when we recorded the Chun Qiu record. Yeah. That was a pretty smooth process. It was a very happy process, and it was a low budget process. But I think I'm much happier with the recording quality. Mm-hmm. But we'll get to that in time.
Yeah. And then Chun Qiu, the bassist, he had his own talents that were kind of yet to be explored. Like he was utilized as a bassist, but he had just this brewing intensity, almost like he could have been like his own frontman if given the chance.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
How was your relationship with like the rest of the band, like in the beginning?
Everyone loves Tang Dynasty. I loved Tang Dynasty, but he wasn't. Look, he's remembered now as some sort of like genius bass player, which he wasn't at all. He was barely capable of playing a lot of this stuff. You wouldn't believe what rehearsing him was like. He was not good in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. He wasn't. He was great, a great guy, just an amazing human being in so many ways.
As far as his presence, you knew like there was something that drew you to him in some way.
Yeah, no, I don't know. That's kind of whole later mythology too, I think. I mean, when I met him, he was this porcine, really, really big, round, fudgy face. And he had a funny kind of a permed mullet. And he would wear like jean suit ensembles of sort of, acid washed denim, jacket and same color acid washed denim pants. And he was kind of goofy. I mean, he didn't turn cool until Tang Dynasty got famous and he got kind of a makeover. He lost a lot of weight, and not always for good reasons. I mean, part of it had to do with some of his unhealthy habits. But he was, look, he was a great, wonderful human being, a great guy. But, look, he wasn't going to win any Bassist of the Year awards. Like he was, it's like me. I wasn't a very good guitarist. He wasn't a very good bassist. He was good enough to play, but it's not like there were challenging bass parts on any of the Tang Dynasty songs, right?
It is cool having an interview like this. You peel back the layers. You kind of. I feel like it's not right to beatify him or to canonize the guy. I mean, right. He's great, but I mean, he was funny. He was really, really funny and warm and could make friends with anyone. I mean, he had just such a personal touch. That's what I miss. It's not like, okay, so yeah, I when I came back, when I came back to China in early '91, it was actually May of '91. And we got back together, and they were putting together. We were still just starting to have like the songs already because they had gotten signed. That was the big news in '91. But they didn't have all the songs together, and the idea was that Chun Qiu would be the singer. And right, because you see like a little bit of that toward like the last track. You see a little bit more of him.
No, he sings on one song. It's called Chun Qiu, or it's called Chun Qiu, Legend.
Legend, yeah.
I argued against that vociferously because I thought that no. You have an okay voice, but Dingwu has a magical voice. You can't be the lead singer of the band. I mean, that's just never going to happen. And I argued myself blue in the face until they all agreed that it had to be Dingwu. Fortunately, the producer agreed with me. Mm-hmm. But that was going to be weird. And this was not about anything except that Dingwu is he's not an introvert, but he's modest, and this is one of his great attributes. This is one of the great things about him, is that he's a very nice guy, and he's not pushy. He wasn't gonna advocate for himself and fight for it himself. So that's maybe the best thing I ever did was just insist that Dingwu be the singer of the band.
Yeah, and then of course when Chun Qiu died, of course that was awful.
Yes, absolutely.
There was a lot of tell me about it.
So I was in the States at the time. I was a graduate student. It was 1995, and I got a phone call. It was already May 17th my time, but it was May 18th in China already. So he'd already been dead a day. He just actually. And Landy Zhang, who was the producer, he finally got me at home. They had been, really trying to find a phone number for me, and had ended up calling my brother in the Bay Area, who ended up giving them my phone number. And so, I was just in absolute shock. But I could not. It was for various reasons. It was impossible for me to get to China right then. It was just simply not possible. So I had to just sort of mourn from a distance and, hear in phone calls with my sister, who was at that point, very soon after Chun Qiu's death, actually started dating Dingwu, and learning about, what had happened and seeing the pictures and the video from the funeral. I didn't get back to China until the following year, until about a year later in May of 1996. So, yeah, really, really, really very tragic. I mean, I don't know how much I can say about, the circumstances of his death. But I mean, the immediate impact on the band was pretty catastrophic. I mean, it sounds like a cliche out of This Is Spinal Tap, but it's true that he was sort of, the lukewarm water between
Was he like the peacemaker?
Absolutely, he was the peacemaker. Because, I mean, it wasn't just between, as typically the lead guitarist and the lead singer. That's the standard band dynamic, right? They're at each other's throats easily. So, of course, the affable bass player is the peacemaker. He was also a peacemaker between Lao and Zhao Nian, who was the drummer, because Lao, didn't have a lot of patience for Zhao Nian in a lot of ways. So that was a really, really huge issue. And so when Chun Qiu died, there was the band almost instantly just sort of started to break apart. And that was really part of the reason why they asked me to come back. And that was why I wanted to come back. I said, look, I mean, I had by that time cut my hair short. I was, trying to, be on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, because you still had like school going, right?
Yeah. I mean, the hair short thing had nothing to do. It was a fucking girl I was dating who wanted me to. She said, that there's no reason for you to have that hair except as a sexual attractant to signal, virility or whatever. So she said, if you really love me, you'll cut it. Which, of course, it's fucking stupid. It's Samson and Delilah. But anyway, so I went back to China at their insistence. And I swear to God, I mean, my mission was peace. I said, look, I have an extraordinary fondness for this band that I helped to start. But, you guys got famous in spite of me, not because of me. You guys got famous and got signed in my absence. I had very little to do with it except maybe giving it a name and an early direction. But people know the band as the four of you with nothing to do with me. So me rejoining the band is not an option. I will make peace. I want to make sure that, you guys understand that you need to work together, and I will, do whatever I'll attend all the rehearsals, but I'll be there. I'll try to step in and be the peacemaker. That worked for a little while. He said, hey, play a little rhythm guitar on this. Yeah, great. But it didn't work for very long.
Yeah.
They were still at each other's throats.
By the time, and then there was the tribute album, Goodbye Zhengzhou.
Goodbye Zhengzhou, yeah.
And that was, and you had a song on Epic called Your Vision, and you recontextualized it, right? You actually sang that one. Yeah,
I sang that on the original, and I mean, I have the worst voice in the world. Please do not go listen to it.
I've listened to it enough, man.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry you've had to endure that.
Oh, man.
But there's kind of a cool guitar solo on it, so that's what makes up for it. But yeah, I mean, I think it was only appropriate that I sang something, and yeah, it was not recontextualized so much as just sort of recut. I mean, there was a shorter version of it on Tang Dynasty's second album, Epic. Mm-hmm. And, I originally didn't want to put it on there. I didn't think, we've already released this song, but not as Tang Dynasty song, they said. And, there were a couple other songs that they've been workshopping, and the band took a vote. They wanted to put this song on, so we did. So it goes, I mean, I will not listen to that song. I mean, or I'll sing the first couple of minutes where there's any singing, because it's just,
Yeah, well.
But, I mean, I like what it's about. I mean, it's just basically about the sort of irony that it was Chun Qiu among all of us who always talked about, hey, 30 years from now, we're going to be, or 50 years from now, we're going to be these old toothless guys, and we're going to have grandkids, and we're all still going to be friends, right? That kind of thing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You're the one who's always saying that. Now you're the one who has to die before you're even, it's like 25.
Yeah. course, like with that, you know, the scene was changing. Of course, in the Chinese context, there was a lot, you know, springing up and down genre-wise, like grunge and punk sort of coexisting, which is like really weird.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the weird decontextualized, China of the time. I mean, there wasn't a logical order in which music should have evolved, right? I mean, it's just uprooted and planted in this very, very different soil.
And as you saw, like the compilations that I posted, right, that I uploaded, there was, you know, a lot of strangeness going on, a lot of like uniqueness too, like uniquely part of that scene.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I love about it. I mean, I love how quirky and mishmash it is. How, you know, it doesn't obey genre conventions, from the West. I think that's kind of part of its charm, part of the whole charm of Chinese rock. You know, there were some people like me who were maybe pretty insistent that we should try to create a rock with sort of identifiably Chinese elements to it. And, you know, there are people who mistakenly think that this was some kind of part of some kind of ethno-nationalist project of mine, which is nonsense. I just thought it was cool.
You wanted to envelop like what Tang was, the opening of all these influences, which, you know, even past you, like they've experimented with a lot of genres.
That's right. Especially past me. I mean, I think it gets even more interesting later into my time playing music in China.
We all know how much of a kind of a I don't even know what to say about Mixed Bag. It's kind of an unrealized mess of what Epic was. It was of like a dark time for the band too, because they had their own afflictions that they were working past, and then the mastering was all wrong.
Yeah.
And like it just sounded like really awkward, right?
Yeah. I mean, you know, if you have a recording of that original, all you need to do is just, you know, drop it into Audacity and just put a limiter on it and just kick up the volume and it sounds good. Just it's pretty easy to fix.
It's way too quiet.
It's just way too quiet, right? I mean, it seemed so weird to me at the time, but you know, when that decision was taken not to have it professionally mastered, we were
really.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, first of all, we'd kind of run out of money, but second, there was this idea that this is, Otomo kind of saying, well, one of the things about this band is that there's a lot of dynamic range and a lot of dynamic change within the songs.
Right.
And if we master it, we're going to lose a lot of that. It'll all get squashed into, sort of one uniform level of, decibel level, and you'll lose some of the subtlety. Mm-hmm. And so we thought, hey, you're the pro, it was my first time recording a record, so I had no fucking idea. I didn't really understand what mastering was at that time. So yeah, I mean, I'm full of regrets on that album, but I will stand by a lot of the composition on it.
I appreciate, each album, like, going forward. Like, I never really thought any different, like, until I kind of, like, read the background. But even then, like, the teenager in me willing to hang on was like, Tang Dynasty. They're still my band.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, you were expressing, I think, what a lot of people felt. I mean, a lot of people were pretty disappointed in the production of that record, and a lot of people thought the stylistic change was too abrupt. I mean, because, obviously it was less metal, more prog, longer song formats. Dingwu's voice was challenged at that time for various reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and but yeah, even then, there's. I mean, you mentioned there's kind of a mysticism to it. Even when his voice was like John's, he couldn't quite hit the high notes, but he had to do something with his voice, and whatever he managed to do, like, it had its own unique quality about it.
Yeah. That's a very charitable way of putting it.
99, I think, Thin Man, Shoren was just becoming popular, and they had their own history. They're more like funk rock kind of thing.
Yeah, I was really close to those guys. I hung out with them an awful lot right after, especially, the last couple of years of Tang Dynasty.
Because they had a different singer back in the early 90s. Like when they did like the compilation tracks, they had a different singer. And then Dai Chin, he was bassist, and then he moved to vocals.
Yeah, and Sar joined as on bass, but I didn't really know them until Daichin joined.
Oh,
so
okay.
I probably didn't know them until 96 or 7.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that was the Daichin era, right? In 97.
Yeah, so I remember when when they opened for us in Tianjin was really the first time that I kind of got struck by lightning by my wife,
right.
Who I would go on to marry. So she was on tour. She was dating their drummer at the time, Wang Lan, and she was on tour with them. And that's when I really noticed her and went kind of gaga for her.
Oh man!
And yeah, we then 6 years later we were married. So that was pretty cool. But anyway, Thin Man was really they were such an energetic band. I am still very, very, very close friends with Funing, who's their guitar player.
Yeah.
He now makes boutique effects and he gives them to me. We hang out every time I'm in China. I saw him quite a bit when we were back this time. He spends his time, he travels a lot. He's, sometimes he's in Turkey, sometimes he lives in Japan.
Right.
But when he's in Beijing and I'm in Beijing, we hang. He's a great guy. And his wife is one of my wife's best friends. So there's a lot of reason for us to spend time together. I loved that band when in their heyday. They were just such a high energy, such a fun show to see. So yeah.
Yeah. My favorite Thin Man song is "Wound." 是你抚摸我的伤口.
Yeah, I know that one. Shanko, yeah.
Yeah. That one, it still resonates with me, and I love Daichin's voice, and it's those bands, and hearing you, give context, give a little more background, it really makes it very special. Like, wow. It's good.
So Wang Lan is still in Beijing. He's still playing drums. Sar, actually their bass player, he ended up going to Berklee College of Music. I actually wrote a letter in support of him to help get him in there some years back. And Daichin, I believe, is making films now.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, he lives in the U.S. and I haven't seen him at all. But we really didn't stay close. I mean, the only one I stayed close to was Funing.
Oh, okay. That's cool, though. I mean,
they kind of bridged the gap for me between the time I left Tang Dynasty in '99 and the time I started Spring and Autumn. My involvement in music was only peripheral, and it was mainly through my connection with that band.
So, during that time, you were just all in on school, on
I had come back to China. I was working.
You were working?
Company. I had some musical projects. I did a stage play that I performed the music for, just to sort of me and a percussionist, just doing everything from sort of sound effects to.
Is that the era where you kind of you're kind of just experimenting with things and see where this goes?
Yeah, a little bit of that. I mean, look, actually one of the songs that I wrote for that stage play was the bones of the song "The Huntsman Lieren" by Chun Qiu, which is the theme of the Sinica Podcast. So.
Oh, okay. So,
That's
Chun
the
Qiu, like, talking about them getting together and, igniting that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I mean, the big news obviously is that we are reuniting.
Yeah, oh man, that was, yeah.
We're booked out to play at the end of March at the San Sanling, the 3:30 Metal Festival. We're going to play a 7-song set. Very, very excited about that. But yeah, so we started off, I met Yang Meng, who is the lead singer, and he was at the time playing in a band called The Seventh Day, Di Qi Tian, and they were based in Kunming. And I met him at the end of 1998 when we were on tour with Tang Dynasty down there. Just, before we went into the studio to record the album, we went out and played all the songs for it, played a few shows just to sort of really have it under our fingers. And that's when I hung out a couple of evenings actually with this guy Yang Meng. People were hanging out and playing acoustics, and he and I really hit it off musically. I loved his voice. I loved like his sort of his aesthetic ideas about how to do kind of folk rock Chinese music, sort of progressive, like folk metal or progressive folk metal. And we had a lot of connection. And I said, hey, yeah, if you ever get up to Beijing, look me up. So, a couple of years later, he did move to Beijing and he did look me up. And I remembered him, and he had come up with his band, The Seventh Day, which was, one of these weird, it was in one of those moments where a lot of people were trying to do new metal, and Yang Meng himself was
so that was during the era of like Yacha and Twisted Machine and all of that.
Exactly. Yeah. There was a band called what were they called? What were they called? My God. Something Brothers, like the C China something. Anyway, there was like Oxygen Can, Twisted Machine. Yaksa was kind of new metal-ish at the time, although they changed. They were more grindcore later on. Pretty amazing. Some of them were really good bands, but the genre as a whole is not something I like. Anyway, part of that band splintered off and formed what would become AK-47. You're probably familiar.
AK-40, yeah.
So that was some of the guys from that band. But Yang Meng sought me out, and he wanted to start a new band with me. And after turning him down a couple of times, just saying, "Look, I'm out of it now. I'm done." He came to me and brought along Ko Zhengyu, who is at the time the lead guitarist of this band called Suffocated, still is.
Yeah, Suffocated.
Yeah. So he brought him along, and we hit it off really great. And I gotta say, I like everyone in that band. We're all friends and everything, but the guy I'm really close with is Ko Zhengyu. The other guitarist. So we actually did become quite close friends. We're still very close friends, and so he's the one who his participation in the band convinced me that this is something worth doing. And we bonded on guitar tones and a lot of technique stuff. So
right.
I think he's such a great player, and he's really he's fun to rehearse with, and he's got a great sense of humor, and takes everything just seriously enough, but not too seriously. So yeah, it was his and my idea to get the band back together, and we were able to reassemble pretty quickly.
Yeah, so that first album you mentioned was kind of more of a quicker process, which you actually appreciated a lot more. So, from what you remember about the experience, do you still listen to certain songs and say oh yeah, I can tell why I appreciated that experience?
Well, yeah, it was quick in the studio, but we had been playing those songs for years.
Right,
so
right. You had all that time to road test.
Right. So so we wrote some of those songs within the first weeks of the band's existence. So, yeah, it was that band was so free of any drama, and there's a little drama, as there always is, but not too many outsized egos. It was pretty good. Very happy experience all around. That's why I'm heading back into it.
Yeah, and so tell me about that. So you're going to China like April?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's up in the air. I'm going back this next month. I'm going back, actually a little more than a month from now. Not quite 2 months from now. I'll be in Beijing from about March 11th to about April 8th. After that, I'm going to come back, and hopefully by then our house will be on the market, and we'll hopefully sell it quickly. I've got to relocate, buy a new house in Madison, Wisconsin. That's the big thing, because my daughter goes to school there, and she's the only one who's going to have a house where we can keep our too big for Beijing dog. We can't bring our dog with us, but he's a member of the family. We can't, there's no way I'm going to separate from him. So my daughter will take care of the dog in Madison. We will move back to China for most of the year, and then come back to Madison, 3-4 months of the year, hopefully. Meanwhile, so I will be continuing to do all the things that I'm doing. I hope that's still possible. The podcast, still doing a lot of writing, work on some other writing projects, and most of all, play music. I'm hoping to not just do spring and autumn, but look for other musicians to start another side project, maybe like doing more sort of American style rock, and even more sort of I don't know, maybe even some covers of 70s rock songs that I love. So,
are you doing new spring and autumn material? Is this going to materialize into an album?
We will. That's the plan. I mean, we're all writing. We all have. I mean, Youngman and I especially. I've got a bunch of song ideas. He's got a bunch of song ideas. I mean, our plan right now, I mean, hopefully we'll be able to execute on it.
Just so I know, like for the article to like Kaiser Kuo discusses career progression, new spring and autumn album,
Yeah. I mean, that's the plan. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's been so very long. It's been 10 years since the last one, but we'll probably go into sort of a retreat. Ko Jung-yu and Yang Meng and I, we're the three writers. Everyone's invited, but we're going to go to a mountain town in Yang Meng's home province of Yunnan, and just sort of hole up there and try to get the juices flowing and write something. So that's the plan. We're going to hopefully take a whole month and do that.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask you too about your Sinica podcast and doing like interviews, kind of like what we're doing. Like, do like the dialogue that you guys engage in, do they like based on their answers? Does that like inspire you to like ask like another question that you didn't plan before?
Of course, yeah, of course. I mean, otherwise it would be really wooden and robotic. I mean, you can't just go. Your plans are evaporate immediately upon hitting record, right? I mean, nothing. No plan survives the first battle. Yeah, no script survives the first answer. They're inevitably going to, you can't anticipate how they'll answer the question, so you can't go robotically to the next question that you had written out.
Right.
It wouldn't work. So yeah, you have to listen. I mean, that's the real skills. You have to listen to what they say and segue naturally on what they say, just like you're doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's amazing. Like with each guest that you have, do you like kind of like take it all in and say like, holy shit, like I learned a lot that I wouldn't have otherwise? Absolutely.
I mean, that's half the reason I do this is, I mean, it's selfishly just for my own edification.
Yeah.
And people are always saying, oh, you know so much about China. I know a lot about China because I talk to really smart people and ask them the questions that I want to know the answers to. So that's why if I seem to know anything, I owe it entirely to these excellent guests I've had over the last 15 years.
And it's amazing what you're able to build, and again, it shapes your knowledge and like kind of gives you a drive to like continue and kind of pat yourself on the back and saying like, based on the dialogue that we have, like there is something here.
No question at all. That's exactly what it is.
And over the years, I've seen you post recipes of your favorite Chinese dishes. And what particular dish do you have like some longing for? Like you have it and you're like, man, this takes me back. What are you looking forward to?
There's stuff that I just have never tried to make here in the States. Because I don't have like the right fruit woods for smoking or for roasting. But like Peking duck, I mean, absolutely. That's like one thing I'm never going to eat really good Peking duck stateside. I mean, that's one of the first things that I go for and I crave really badly as soon as I get back to China. But there's a ton of them. A lot of Sichuan dishes that I've never sort of had the gumption to undertake because I know I can't nail them. I might as well just sort of wait to just eat the real thing when I get back to China. But yeah, I like to cook. I cook a lot. I cook pretty much every day. These days I'm on some stupid diet that doesn't allow me to eat rice or breads, it's limiting. I gotta try to drop some weight before our show. I don't want to get up on stage like a big fucking fat dude and be too embarrassed. I'm trying to do that. So what other foods do I just absolutely crave? There's a lot that I crave that I unfortunately will not be able to eat when I get back. But there's so much food available in China that I have no doubt at all that I'm just going to be in paradise, constantly tempted, and find my weight loss goals threatened around the corner.
Yeah. But considering your career up to this point and everything, with Tang Dynasty, with Chun Qiu, and all these other projects in between, what have you learned about yourself, not only as a musician, but as a person?
That's a good question. I think one thing that I would say I have learned about myself is that I'm pretty mission driven, that I have, there are things that I do, whether as a vocation, as in the case of my work, the podcast, and before that as a comms director at Baidu, and before that as a journalist, I know that I'm happiest when what I am doing contributes directly to mutual understanding between China and the United States. I feel like what I've learned about myself is that my life is basically lived as this grand project of reconciliation between two parts of who I am, the Chinese me and the American me. I want there to be identity. I want there to be, congruence. I want there to be, convergence between these two things and harmony between these two things. So when I am doing something that I think proactively contributes to the improvement of understanding, I feel a sense of personal fulfillment. When I am not doing something, I feel like, why am I doing this? This is kind of a waste. And there've been only a few things that I have undertaken that feel like they're in that category. I worked for an ad agency for a brief moment, and I felt like it was a complete waste of my time.
Right.
So that's probably the thing that I've discovered. I also have discovered that I am not that good of a guitar player.
Oh man.
And I have to just sort of know what my limits are, that I cannot no matter how much time I put in, there's going to be hard limits, and that I have to write around that. I have to work within my limits to do music that I'm happy with within those technical limitations.
Yeah. But it's cool. Like, in recognizing your limits, you do what you can. I had to recognize, my limits, my being born disabled, but realizing that, I can't do everything I set my mind to, but I still gotta roll with the punches, pun intended, make music the way I want to do, collaborate, have dialogues with musicians from around the world that honestly, it's the same experience you do. I learned so much, and I'm grateful to have you.
Well, I mean, I'm really grateful. This is such an interesting and fun conversation, and I love that you have just immersed yourself so much in music that people don't know well enough. I mean, and that you're doing what I'm trying to do. You're trying to popularize. I mean, in this case, it's not just one country, but multiple geographies that you've really become expert in, and that's just so admirable, Jake. So, I mean, I thank you for doing what you're doing, and please keep up the great work, man.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, anything you'd like to say to your fans?
Do I have fans? Gosh. Yeah, no, man. Well, thank you for your unflagging support over the years. I mean, it's just been amazing. I really, so much of the reason I keep doing what I'm doing is because I know there are people out there who are appreciative of what it is. And that kind of feedback just sustains me in so many ways. The money helps too, but subscribe and like, right?
That was epic, man. It was like Tang Dynasty epic, but without the shitty master.
You're never gonna let me down. Let go. All right. Thanks, man.